You know where you are!
This is Appetite for Distortion.
Welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode number 429. My name is Brando. Coming up, we got an interview with the legendary rock producer, Tom Werman, to talk about his book, Turn It Up, My Time Making Hit Records in the Glory Days of Rock Music. He's worked with Mötley, Crüe, Poison, Twisted Sister, Jeff Beck, Cheap Trick, Ted Nugent, and so many others. And just to set the table before we go into the interview, this is one of those episodes where I combine my real radio job with the podcast. So I am actually producing his radio promotional tour. So he's on Zoom, I'm on Zoom, and I'm connecting him to different radio stations across the country: New Hampshire, Delaware, California, New York, Connecticut, all different states, different radio stations across, to different DJs to interview him about his book, and I get my time as well. So speaking of which, thanks, Misty.
Thank you. Bye. Happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
Bye.
All right, Tom, your next interview is with me.
Okay. And you've heard a lot of the answers.
You know, it's funny. Yes, I think about that a lot. You asked, during this whole radio tour, Premier Network's radio tour, do I always hear, like, is it annoying? Is it boring for me? Is it, what if I have an opportunity to interview that person? So a lot of things go through my mind. For one, it's not boring. It's exciting. I love hearing whether they're different stories from you or the same stories, because it's the subject matter I like. So even whatever stories we get in our time together, I highly recommend people get your book, because it's just full of just amazing stories and perspective. I Turn It Up, My Time in Making Hit Records in the Glory Days of Rock Music. Did you always know you were going to write a book? Because I know I've learned you've been retired for quite some time. This kind of just came out of nowhere from a podcast. I heard you tell that story. That's how the idea sprouted, right?
Well, yes. And there was another thing I came across just surfing the internet. I came across this incredibly rude and critical review of me, not of my music, but of me. And I had never met the guy. And it just came out of left field. And I contacted the editor of the podcast, and I said, "Can I respond to this, please?" And he said, "Sure. Write us something, and we'll put it on the blog." And the readers loved it, and I kind of eviscerated the guy who had written the critical review. And they said, "Would you write more for us?" So I wound up writing 18 episodes for this blog called popdose.com. And that became kind of the backbone of the book. And then I would occasionally I'd have a memory, or something from the past, or I'd hear a song that triggered a thought, and I would go and write for 10 or 15, maybe 20 minutes, and I'd slot it into the right time period in those 18 episodes, which chronicled my musical life. And then it turned into a book, and I knew that there would be a healthy number of people out there, finally at this point in time, who were interested in classic rock, and who would be interested in knowing more about how it was made. Now we have whole families who listen to this music, and we had to get to this point in generations before the numbers of people who were into classic rock were big enough for me to write a book.
Okay. And speaking of families, you may hear my 7-month-old cooing in the background.
7 months. Wow.
Yeah.
My firstborn is 50.
Oh, I'll ask you about that because it's I'm teaching him to be a rock and roller. I'm trying to. He was born with a natural mohawk, which is great. I've got him,
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses onesies, Beatle onesies. But I guess what I like to ask when I have somebody as established as you, when you have a career and then you have kids, did your kids know how cool their dad was, or did they think that you were kind of lame? Did you try to influence, as your parents influence you in your music? Did you try to be like, hey, you got to like Motley Crue, you got to like Cheap Trick, or did they find their own path?
They liked it. As teenagers, of course, my daughter transitioned when she was about 15 into the 90s, which was less comfortable for me. But the kids spent time backstage. They got great seats. They had backstage passes. I was definitely cool in that regard, you know. And as a parent, probably embarrassing to them. But yeah, they grew up in this heavy metal kind of glam hair band environment. And I had people at my house from all walks of the entertainment business, from Dee Snider and Rick Nielsen and Ted Nugent to John Belushi, and they were very well adjusted as a result of that. In other words, it did not affect them. They didn't do drugs, and they were civically responsible, and my daughter was president of her class at North Hollywood High, and homecoming queen. I mean, they did very well. They have a great set of values, despite my career.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. We'll see. Sometimes my son makes an appearance on the podcast. It depends on his mood, so maybe I'll have him pop in at the end of this. But I'm also it's funny, and I got tickled by the beginning because I heard one of the responses from one of the stations you answered about how the podcast a podcast kicked off the story you told before. It's the idea for the book, but the fact that it took a negative response, and I'm like, did he deserve that much work for you to be doing for them? So do I need to be, because this is my 429th episode of this podcast, but I'm a nice guy. Do I need to be mean to start getting people to, more people to come on the podcast and do things for me? So I don't know. I think it says a lot about you that you took the time to not only respond, but to do work for them, essentially.
Yeah, you have to defend yourself. I mean, you set yourself up for a lot of criticism. I think a lot of bands don't want to give you credit. You're a successful producer, and people kind of expect a good product from you. And so your introduction, your pairing with the band can take credit away from them in certain members of the band can resent that. So that's critical. And critics review your stuff, and if one guy doesn't like it and he writes for Rolling Stone or something, it's a personal thing, and he can be critical, and you just have to sit there and take it. You do not have to be negative.
Okay. All right, good. Because I try to be the one guy in the press that doesn't seek out the negative, but it's hard because I do a Guns N' Roses themed podcast. That's how mine is, just a little bit different than everyone else's. But people look for the clickbait titles and to spin things around, to want to talk about the debauchery back in the days.
Yeah.
Sometimes these things come up. With that, I got to ask something that may have been a controversy during your time, because I have a lot of questions from listeners. That's also how I try to separate myself. I want to get them involved. This is from Michael Collins. Who do you think would have won between Vince and Axl if they actually had that fight? Because you were working heavily with Mötley Crüe at that time,
You
or was
you
this
you
before?
you mean a physical fight?
A physical fight. They challenged each other. Vince, do you recall that? Vince challenged Axl Rose to a fight, and
I'm not
Axl.
surprised. I'm not surprised. I frankly, I think Vince. Yeah.
Okay. If you don't remember, Vince punched Izzy because Izzy was flirting with his wife. This was at like a VMA Awards. And
Wow.
Axl actually agreed to the fight, but in a country that allows fighting to the death, and Vince never responded. All right, so I guess you never heard of that story. So
Yeah.
you must get a kick of all these rumors that come out of the artists that you worked with. You know, is there a ratio that you can give where, you know, the rumors you've heard versus what's actually the truth in your
Well,
career?
most of that happened around Mötley Crüe, and I think most of them are false. Especially this latest one, which has some ghostly studio musician coming in and replacing Nicky's bass parts and having him not, or during the time I was with them, there was a rumor that it wasn't really Nikki Sixx, that he had been replaced by this guy. Silly stuff happens. I can't recall any rumors about other basically controversial acts that could have had rumors about them, but it was all mostly Mötley Crüe.
Yeah, it's people are kind of jumping on Motley, I guess, now because of the whole Mick Mars situation and confusing. Do
Sure.
you what are your because I just had John Five on, awesome guy. I know him and Mick have a great relationship, but do you have a take as far as is there miscommunication with his illness and needing to retire from the road versus making new music now with John Five instead of Mick, where Mick is obviously making new music by
Yeah.
himself?
Yeah. He had an explosive single, I think, that I heard online. Really good. Mick was heavily underrated. I'm not familiar with John Five, but Mick was the best of the four. Really, he and Tommy were the best, and the easiest to work with in the studio. The most cooperative, the most talented. I enjoyed Mick. He was my favorite, and we were both. He was older, so I think it was easier for him to relate to me. But yeah, I feel bad. I feel bad for the guy. I think I tend to believe his side of this conflict.
Sure. I got to ask because something you kept saying throughout the interviews you've been doing throughout the morning that I've been able to have. It's a privilege because it's like I get to hear these stories over and over again. But it's funny when everyone asks about Ted Nugent, you were
Right.
like, no politics.
Right.
I'm curious. Do you think he's because I respect him so much as a musician, but one time I was offered free tickets to one of his shows.
Yeah.
And I didn't go because I knew it wasn't going to be about the music. He was going to be on stage promoting whatever politics he was, and that's my friend who went said that was half the show.
Oh,
Do you
really?
think? Do you think he's ruining or maybe altering his legacy as a musician with just how outspoken he's become? And we're not focusing on Cat Scratch Fever and just the great musician that he is.
I do. I do think that. Ted knows that I'm a registered Democrat, and that doesn't matter to him. We actually still communicate, and he sends me new music that he's done. I just think many of my friends say, how can you even talk to that guy? And I understand that. I think that he is obviously he's very outspoken. He's very bright. I don't understand how he got to his position politically. I just don't get it. But he has said some things that are, for me, just plain unacceptable. But we don't really talk about it that much. He introduced me to firearms. He talked to me about how certain animal rights organizations don't quite understand the whole hunting thing, and how you thin the herd and keep the deer from starving, and dying from the cold. And he did, when we first met, he did introduce me to alternative perceptions, alternative attitudes, which I think was healthy. But yes, to your question, I do think that his musical career will be heavily overshadowed by his political pronouncements.
And I am as neutral, as Swedish as you can get as far as like beliefs. It's just when somebody tries to be divisive, and even if it's somebody who I kind of align myself with more beliefs, but it's not, I don't know, time put in place for everything. But
Yeah.
I guess, but I digress. I want to ask, because obviously Guns N' Roses themed podcast, and I found it so fascinating because no one has anything ever negative to say about Duff McKagan, but you had a negative experience, and I want to give a credit to a fellow podcaster of mine, because I heard his interview with you, Chuck Shute, and
Yeah.
he kind of asked what I would have been thinking. Like, was he on drugs at the time? Was he drunk? And the fact that like it still bothers you to this day,
Yeah.
and you expect him to remember it because it happens so often. Is that something that whether it's from Duff or anybody else, do you expect any apologies coming out of this book?
Oh God, no.
Okay.
I don't imagine he would read it. I don't assume that any particular person, any single person, would definitely read the book. But I'm not bothered by it, as I'm not bothered by Dee Snider. I'm puzzled. I'll always be curious about why this happened, especially McKagan. I mean, the guy went nuts. That night, when I believe he may have been intoxicated, and he threatened me, which was hilarious. I mean, the guy was 30 years younger or whatever. I don't know, 20 years. And he must be 6'1" or 6'2", and here I am. I was like 50, and it's just ridiculous. He took every opportunity he could to badmouth me.
And this was over, because this is at the time you were considering producing Appetite for Destruction, and he misinterpreted, or whatever it was. You were holding your ears, not like you disliked the music, but it was just kind of loud.
It was not kind of loud. It was ear split. And you knew it was ear splitting anyway, because I asked him where the singer was, and he said, well, he doesn't rehearse with us because he can't hear himself. I mean, come on, that's loud. And it was a tiny room. And I did say, listen, it would make more sense for me to come back at a different time when your singer was here, because I can't really, evaluate a song without a lyric or a melody, and he reported to a magazine, which I read after that I put my hands over my ears, said, oh, fuck, and walked out. I mean, complete fiction. It just wasn't true at all. And I said, why is this guy trying to slam me? And then it continued. There were 2 or 3 more times, when he did this to me, in person, not to me in person, but when I was present, he would say these things. I asked him why he made that up, and he got, that's when he threatened me. I don't know. I know the guy is basically intelligent. He was a decent musician. I don't know.
One last quick question before we go on to the next station, because I still have a job to do, I suppose. Because we're going to go to Philadelphia next. Isn't this cool that I was like, we go to Atlanta, we go to Chicago, we go to Nashville. It's fun. I like this insider radio, insider baseball kind of thing.
How many more are there?
After me, we are gonna go to where are we going to? Like I said, Philly, and then we got to meet later on this afternoon to talk to my friend Meltdown at in Detroit, WRIF.
No.
Quick question: did you get to ask Slash then, because you were being considered to produce his solo record that came out in 2010? Did that conversation come up, and if not, just a fun story from that time?
I didn't realize that he waited until 2010 because we met in about 1998 or 97. I was asked to his house. I went there. We had a meeting. I remember he showed me his snake collection, which was incredibly memorable. And then he decided, I guess, to work with somebody else. But I thought he made an album then. I guess it
wasn't for the maybe I'm thinking of something different. It wasn't for the Snake Pit record, or was it for the album with all the singers?
That could be, yeah. It was an album that was he definitely was about to make, and that was before the
okay
1999. Yeah.
Okay, so I misunderstood. It's for the Slash the Snake Pit records, which is those were good records. Maybe I'll pretend what it would sound like with you. Anyway, Tom, thank you for your time with me. Now we have to go on to the next station, and I hope we get to talk again more extensively.
You're very welcome. Yes, that was a pleasure.
Thanks, Tom. Certainly could have kept going with Tom, but I encourage you to get his book and not just get all the stories spoiled on podcast, because it's a fun read. I got one of the advanced copies, the digital copies, and went through it. And not a lot of GNR stuff in there, but what we spoke about is in there. But of course, a lot about the Crüe, a lot about Ted Nugent. And I kind of want to piggyback on what we were talking about with Ted Nugent, because I think it's important to bring up now, based upon something that happened on Twitter X. As I always mention, the conversation continues in between the broadcasts on social media. So Twitter X, whatever you want to call it, follow me at the AFD podcast. That's the first and foremost thing. So first of all, whether you like Ted Nugent's beliefs or not, that's fine by me. That I have my own decision where I felt, if I go to his show, I'm not going to be able to, just sit and watch Strangled Hold and Cat Scratch Fever. He's going to go off about his beliefs and very angrily. It's kind of the same thing with Stained and Aaron Lewis right now. He's a little bit more of a sociopath with spelling out certain things, spelling out sentences with dead coyotes. I think that's pretty fucking sick. But like the conversation that Tom said he had with Ted, where even though I'm not a hunter, I can understand the logic of thinning their herd for the betterment of the group, where, animals starving, detriment to the land. I can understand that. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to pick up the gun and kill the animal. But if you want to do it, I'm not going to stop you. So if you like Ted Nugent's beliefs, please, I'm not judging you there. So that's kind of what I want to get to here, because the only beliefs I share here for real are Guns N' Roses beliefs. And even then, if you don't like Chinese democracy, okay, don't like it. I do. You don't like absurd? Okay, I do. You like the general? Okay. I don't. I don't. I mean, I should still wait for the official release of the general, but right now I don't like it. But if you do, that's fine. Whatever, man. Or woman, or whatever you want. It doesn't matter. So I need to make an example of this person, and I'm not going to call them out by name or Twitter handle because then people can assume bullying or whatever. But it's up there on my X if you want to read it for entertainment purposes. And I also want to display the larger purpose of this podcast, which is just to come together to talk about Guns N' Roses, rock and roll, mental health. This is I know this term has kind of been given a bad connotation, but a safe space. Oh, a safe space? Or a fun space, a fun zone, whatever it is. This is an escape from life. This podcast was birthed out of my depression, me trying to save my own life and trying to find myself purpose. Now I have a family. So that's kind of what this is. I've had people message me, because of you sharing your journey, I'm now sober. It's helped me through some tough times and escape from the bad day, just for an hour, a half an hour, whatever it is. That's what this place is. But there are just some people that are just so negative and hate-filled. I can't deal with it. And I'm not going to deal with it. I'll stand up for myself, and that's about it. And then you go live your life. So I had simply put on Twitter, X, whatever, that I believe it's become more of a cesspool of conspiracy theories and hate. But honestly, that's much of social media. That's the internet. That's sadly also real life that's out there. However, like in real life, I'm going to keep to myself. I'm going to ignore the things that I don't enjoy, focus on the things that I do, like Guns and Effin' Roses. How much more neutral of a sentence? I didn't say what party or what conspiracy theories I'm referring to. None of that. But this one person decided in his brain what that meant to him. And I am familiar with this person, even though they don't follow me, because for years, just like many of you, can either become familiar with your name, especially if it's on Facebook, or your Twitter handle, or your MyGNR avatar, whatever it is, because if we've had many interactions over the years, I know I burned a lot of brain cells with legal marijuana, but I remember many of you. So this person right away wrote, please don't be a leftist. That's pretty much the worst thing a person could be at this point. Worse than a pedophile? Okay. Twitter X is by far the best social network, or the less worst, if you will. I won't will, because less worst is not proper English. So if I recommend you stop attacking this place, or if you do, well, the logical thing is to get out of here. I just think that's so weird to defend a social media platform like it's your mom or your friend. Like, you don't like it? Or like, it's like a whole country thing. If you don't like where you're from, get out of here. Go back to where you came from. Go back to MySpace. First of all, they're all the same in my view. I see the same kind of vitriol on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. However, on all of those, I've seen the same kind of cat videos, Guns N' Roses news, just fun things, connecting with friends, jokes. So it's kind of what you look for. But in my experience lately with Twitter, I just see more things in my feed that I'm not looking for. I hit mute a lot. And it's not muting myself from different thoughts and different belief systems. It's when people are divisive. Hey, I'm right. They're wrong. I'm good. You're bad. That stuff bothers me because most of the time it's not that. There's so many nuances to beliefs that it's just never that simple that you can respond in 140 characters or more if you pay for it, which I will never pay for Twitter. So I had to just say, like, in a very, what I think, calm demeanor, but stern, I am a nothingist. Categorizing belief systems is not for me. So I recommend you don't assume you know me. And that's true. I say I'm Jewish. I was raised Jewish. If you need to know, I know I was bar mitzvahed and all that. But I'm not a religious person. If you're religious, that's cool. I have very religious friends, Jewish, Catholic, Christian, other beliefs. I mean, what do I know more than you? I think as humans, it's the unanswerable. How can anyone really know the unanswerable? That's how I look at things, right? But people of faith, I respect it. I'm just more of a therapy person. I had to go to therapy. I couldn't find help through where I have friends who have turned their life around by finding God or religion, and I think that's fantastic, especially if it's helped them get over drug abuse, anything that I think can help you be a good person, whatever it is. Who cares? My route was therapy. If your route is something else, okay, as long as you're not hurting yourself or anyone else, it's all gravy to me. So he goes, hey, I'm not assuming anything. He did. he did, by the way, that I'm a lefty. If you need to know, which it doesn't matter, which I will never go on a rant about political beliefs. This is just more of a rant of the neutralness of this, if that's a word, podcast, where I, like how I said to Tom, I try to be a good guy here and not put pressure on the people I interview and put them in a weird space to answer things that make them uncomfortable. I just want to be down the middle and let's have a good time. Hey, I'm not assuming anything. You did. But if you need to know, because I want to vote for the president of the United States as an adult, you have to register as something. I have no party. So I can't vote in primaries, which is stupid. So I don't want to associate with either of them. That's not for me. It's not. I have friends in both parties. I have friends in no parties. I have friends in other parties. It doesn't matter to me. I'm who I am. When we can talk about we talk about Guns N' Roses, man. That's what this podcast is all about. That's the Guns N' Roses and mental health. Those are the two focuses of this podcast. So he goes, I'm not assuming anything, which he did. But if you're not any kind of ist, perhaps there's that word, perhaps, you shouldn't post stuff against the less worst, which again doesn't make sense, and more free social network. It is X. So X is the most free social network, according to him. Me, it's the same. I see the same stuff on all of them. I don't think this is any better or worse than, other than the layout. I just happen to like the layout of X or Twitter more. And I feel like you can post more without it being so invasive to other people's timelines. So I like Twitter in that regard more. I'm not forced to post a picture. Like, obviously, that's what Instagram is all about. Facebook, sometimes the algorithms are weird. I'm just learning now that I shouldn't have been posting links to my episodes in my statuses. Because that pushes the algorithm down, because they might assume you're spam or you're routing them outside of Facebook. Oh, I'm sorry that I'm having people go to YouTube or iHeartRadio to listen to my podcast. The whole point of my page. So Facebook can be frustrating. Whatever, they all have their good and bad. So he said, just saying, keep it about the music and the band. Don't ruin your account. And if you don't like this place, just go. Like, it's like the Wild West. Get out of here. You don't like this? Get out of here. Go back to where you came from. Like, whoa, it's so weird. This guy is so weird. So I'm not getting nasty. I said, if you don't follow me. This person, that's the best part. This person doesn't follow me, but I recognize the name because for years this person has always interacted with me. And I don't block people unless they are nasty. It's true. Unless they are nasty, share whatever opinion you want. If you want to put your idiocy on display for everyone else to see, that's on you. It doesn't bother me. So like I said, you don't follow me. My account is none of your concern. Right? Very matter of fact. It doesn't matter. If you don't like X, just leave. Do the logical thing. And not the Democratic lefty thin. Again, I am nothing. I am not left. I am not right. But I guess because I'm not totally aligned with this person, I must be the opposite of what he is. Because that's the logical thing. He says do the logical thing while he's speaking illogically. That's what I was dealing with. So I had to flat out say, you are an example of exactly what I was talking about in the original post. Either follow me or just stop commenting on my shit. Just ignore me. If you don't like what I'm talking about, ignore me. If you don't like X, don't use it. Other users also wrote you about it. Leave your Democratic lefty thoughts out of your GNR account. What other users? I might have had like one or two. I really don't block a lot of people. I really don't. I've been very fortunate because I'm somebody who's really self-conscious. Even when it's just some of my stupid jokes, are people going to unfollow me? Am I unfunny? All these things go through my head. So I am so grateful that I have a nice base of listeners of this podcast and people who follow me on my respective different platforms. I'm grateful for it. And 99% of the people that I interact with are just awesome people. And you may not... I'll give a shout out to Leon Zanman. And this is the kind of perfect disagreement that you can have on this podcast. We were talking about the demo Crazy with Chester and Slash, and he's like, I like the Motorhead, the Lemmy version better. Okay, that's great. I happen to like Chester's version better. I know that's sacrilege. Lemmy is God. He will always be God. Motorheads, love them. But Chester's voice, his lyrics, they always meant something else to me. That's just my personal opinion. And he's like, okay, well, you also like Chinese Democracy. Ha ha ha, just kidding. And I was like, ha ha ha, I laughed at that too. That's it. You don't have to like Chinese Democracy. It doesn't bother me. It's just we agree to disagree, and he's still a follower of mine, and we get along. He came on the podcast once for one of the fan obsessions, and he's, just like many of you, are invited back. We don't have to be aligned with all of our Guns N' Roses beliefs. And that's the same thing that goes with life. We don't have to align. That's not how it works. Even if the person you love and you marry, do you agree on everything? No, you don't. So, I mean, that's what makes it crazy. I don't even, again, this person's trying to make it up like he's representing a larger group. Other users are saying this about you. No, bro, they're not. So I had to just flat out say, I'm not left, I'm not right, but it doesn't matter. I'm like, I don't know you, but every interaction with you, you come off as a complete buffoon. I usually don't like going down to the name calling thing because what's the point? But this person, after many years, I'm like, you need to be put in your place. This person is just completely delusional. I weep if they have children that's just going to grow up being a very tunnel vision person. I'm not going to have baby Brownstone grow up to be that. He's going to be accepting of all beliefs. He'll have his own, for sure, but I'm not going to force mine on him. That's just, hopefully he doesn't have kids. So like I said, you're a complete buffoon, and you've lost the privilege to follow me. And I waited before I blocked him because I wanted him to see it. Never followed you. That's not a privilege. Wake up. No, it is a privilege. Everything that we're doing right now, talking on X, Twitter, this podcast, is a privilege. Because we can live in a country where we don't have free speech on my podcast, on social media. We can live somewhere else. So this is all privilege. It is a privilege to have you listen to me. I'm honored to have you listen to me. It is a privilege to have Tom Werman on this podcast. It is a privilege. But this is how a narcissist responds. You can keep the whole name calling. You obviously didn't learn how to keep a conversation going without insulting. And if you don't remember, that's how the conversation began, with him insulting a group of people. If you are a lefty, that's fine. If you are a righty, it's fine. But I think it's just, if you consider one side evil, there are extremists on every side, yeah, but that doesn't represent the majority. But this is just somebody who wants to pick a fight. And this is the best. In all caps. Typical hidden lefty Democrat. Typical, by the way, spelt T-I-P-I-C-A-L. That's not how you spell typical, buddy. There's a Y in there. So, I don't know. Maybe this person's just not that educated. Maybe this is somebody with a learning disability and I should be more sympathetic, but it is what it is. But that won't distract me / us. So us, this is the person that thinks he's part of a group. He thinks he's the William Wallace of Twitter. Here to defend it. Here to defend the honor of Elon Musk. Keep it about music, pal. I mean, my original post was about music. I said I'm going to focus on Guns N' Roses. So that's when I just wrote, silly boy, blocked. That's it. And that was it. So I had to respond, though, and I wanted to retweet it to put it on display, because all but that one guy loved my post about Twitter X. Some of you saying you would have left X if it wasn't for my posts and what I tweet. And that means so much to me. If it wasn't for this podcast, I'd be gone too. If it wasn't for me being able to talk to all of you, I'd be gone too. There's no point. There's no point in this stage of my life. There really isn't a point for me to have social media other than appetite for this. Other than appetite for distortion, there's no point. But I stay on for you. So I retweeted that misspelled typical post from him for all of you to see. And I wrote, finally block this clown. Perfect example of what my previous post was about. Assuming things about people just because they don't align with your beliefs. Creating enemies. This us versus them mentality. It's a sickness. It is a sickness, man. That said, all beliefs are welcome here. And that is the truth. I've said that since the beginning. We meet here. Whatever you believe, wherever you're from, whatever language you speak, whatever your orientation is, come on, Appetite for Distortion. We talk about Guns N' Roses. And then there, we could talk about, did you like Use Your Illusion 1 better? Did you like Use Your Illusion 2 better? And even then, I'm not going to put you down. Because there were some GNR forums that would put you down if you had a negative, because even though that happens with me, people like bash, Axl doesn't sound that great. If you want to share that opinion, fine. You could do that. I'm not going to silence anyone's opinion unless it gets nasty like this person. And it's perfectly summed up, this interaction, by a very nice listener, and I recognize his person's name, who actually does follow me. I'll give you a shout out, Scott Van Sickle. And he goes, that was a fun read into dementia. Right? Like, that's insane. That's insane. This person was having an argument with himself. And it's kind of like that meme of the girl yelling and the cat's just sitting there. That's what it's like. Or you may have seen, I posted something similar where it's a screenshot from the Don't Cry video where Slash is in the car and the girl's yelling at him and Slash is just driving with the cigarette hanging out of his mouth, which is kind of like the original meme, the original version of that cat yelling woman meme. That's kind of what this was. I'm like, bro, just calm down, man. And again, if you don't like me for whatever reason, don't follow me. Don't respond to my stuff. Go on with your day. It's no skin off my back. I'm not going to lose any sponsors because I don't have any sponsors. Now I'm just sad. But it just doesn't matter to me. And I'm not here on a soapbox telling you my beliefs. I'm not. I tell you my opinions on things, primarily with having to do with Guns N' Roses. And that's it. You don't have to agree with me. Most Guns N' Roses fans don't like Absurd. I like it. I'm not going to force you to like Absurd. I happen to think it's fun. Like with The General, I want to really wait until the official release, and there are people who really like the song now and the live version. it gives me no pleasure to say I don't like it. I'm hoping that the recorded version is something that will really change my mind because I want to like it, but I don't. And I think that's okay. That's okay for me not to like something. I don't have to like everything that Guns N' Roses does. That doesn't make me not a Guns N' Roses fan, right? Because there used to be those Guns N' Roses fan sites that if you didn't like everything that they did or do, you're not a fan. Or, look, if you're still clamoring for Izzy to come back, good for you. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, but I'm not going to tell you to stop believing. Keep believing, buddy. Don't stop believing. So I wanted to share that based upon the whole Ted Nugent conversation, because if you like Ted Nugent, his beliefs, what he has to say, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you not to believe, not to like it. It's just not for me. And I'll tell you what, if Axl, even though his beliefs are the same way, but if he was on, because like how Ted's always on Fox News, if Axl was always on CNN and he was always saying these people are, the other side is stupid, the other side is evil, and even though I perhaps may align more with his beliefs more than Ted Nugent's, I probably would get annoyed too. I would get annoyed too. And much like Ted and Axl, you're allowed to share your opinions. It's just, I think I've just dealt with so much anger and divisiveness in my own life, my own personal life, that I just don't want to deal with it in other parts of my life that don't affect me. It's I want to focus on me, on baby Brownstone, my family, my job. So that's, and then this podcast, which is just a nice break from it all. So anyway, I don't know if you want to call this a get in the ring segment, calling people out, but I'm not going to fight the guy. And I kind of asked him to get in this verbal ring, in this battle of wits, and he apparently came unprepared. It's just some people you can't help. So goodbye, dude. You'll never be able to comment on any of my shit again, and you can't enjoy the AFD podcast on X anymore. So goodbye. Anywho, that's it for this episode of Appetite for Distortion. Next episode, we're going to have two awesome listeners that are on this podcast. Chris Passmore and his son, Cooper, 9 years old. And I thought about initially putting it on this episode to have it to be the second half. But I think I'm going to do, especially if it's going to be an episode, because I already recorded it, so I know how it went, where I'm going to make an episode just for you to share. So a fan obsession episode. It's a fan obsession. I'm going to make it about you. So you may have read it in Loudwire. He put it on a Reddit post where they're from Boston. They flew down to Florida for the Hollywood Bowl show. And it's just a great story how they ended up becoming friendly with GNR management, with Vanessa and Betta. And Cooper was allowed to watch some of the show because they were in the pit, the VIP pit. They were up against the kind of the railing, and we got some video that you'll be able to watch if you watch it on YouTube of Gio, the big security guard, picking him up over the railing and bringing him around to Beta, walking him up on the stage, and he's just watching side stage a lot of songs. He was able to go into Axl's dressing room. Just a really awesome story about what Guns N' Roses management can do for the fans, and just an awesome experience for this young rocker. So I love stories like that, and we're gonna do more of that, the fan obsession. So that'll be the next episode. It's gonna be fun. None of this negative bullshit that came out. I mean, the Tom interview wasn't that negative, but I needed to get this out. My God. Anyway, and also a reminder, if you have already listened to the Big Chris Flores episode with Crazy, I encourage you to listen again, specifically on YouTube, because I would like to give a significant portion of the proceeds of the streams, and YouTube doesn't give me much, to Rock to Recovery. I want to do that because I was given the privilege to share this lost demo of Chester and Slash, and I want to do something good with it. Not just get more followers and get my name out there more. I want to do something with it. So let's do something. Okay, so if you've listened to it a bunch of times, so YouTube, and I also did put the song up with a clip, a story of Chris giving the story behind Crazy on Facebook. And my Facebook is monetized, still is not that much. So if you see the video on Facebook as well, watch it a few times, get me some streams there so I can donate to charity. Okay? So that does it for this episode of Appetite for Distortion. When will you see the next one? In the words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy, I don't know if soon is the word, but you'll see it.